After calling Joe Flacco a security blanket, Asante Samuel says Shedeur Sanders is hard to overlook as QB1. The former New England Patriot and two-time Super Bowl champion, Asante Samuel, is continuing to make the most of his newfound platform on social media as he now seems determined to rally his following in support of the Cleveland Browns rookie quarterback, Shedeur Sanders. Despite recent reports suggesting that the former Colorado Buffalo has been removed from the QB1 conversation in Cleveland, Samuel, like many others, isn't prepared to look past Sanders as a prospect just yet. When it comes to the Browns potentially cutting at least one of their 4 active quarterbacks, the 4-time Pro Bowler isn't willing to bite on that narrative either. No one seems to think that the Browns will keep 4 quarterbacks on their roster. I beg to differ, Samuel exclaimed during the most recent episode of his Say What Needs to Be Said YouTube series. All 4 quarterbacks will make that team. Now, there's always exceptions to the rule, and the exception to this rule is, unless Kenny Pickett garners enough attention for the Browns to trade. If and when that happens, it will be left up to Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel to prove that they are worthy of the starting job. According to Samuel, Joe Flacco is nothing more than a security blanket, while Dillon Gabriel has an uphill battle ahead of him with his height and arm strength. Nevertheless, he's more than confident in his assertion that the Browns will be keeping both of them, along with the others. In light of Cleveland's general manager Andrew Berry mentioning that the team would be more than willing to roster all 4 of them so long as they are 53-man worthy, Samuel felt more than comfortable enough to assert that will happen. As far as the second-generation athlete in Sanders is concerned, the one-off All-Pro is upholding the narrative that the 23-year-old isn't your typical 5th-round quarterback. Still believing in Sanders' collegiate track record, Samuel noted that, when it comes time for the Browns to decide who's QB1 and who's QB2, Shedeur Sanders' name will be hard to overlook and will require some strong, uncomfortable conversations between the coaching staff. And those questions will be, do they really want to win? Unfortunately, for both Samuel and Sanders, it doesn't seem as if anyone in the Browns' front office is tuning in to say what needs to be said. Sanders is currently seeing the least amount of training camp reps of any QB on the roster, and even though Pickett has now sustained a hamstring injury, it seems unlikely that Cleveland will elevate his status by much, if at all. Just a few months ago, the Browns were panicking as their star pass rusher, Myles Garrett, began to publicize his complaints about the franchise's inability to contend in the playoffs. If any of that desperation is still lingering at all, then fans should expect them to ultimately favor the veteran presence of Flacco. His regular season heroics in 2023 were responsible for the last taste of postseason of football, and that's likely worth a lot to a team that has otherwise been destitute for the last several decades. The first cool breeze of late summer swept across the Browns' practice fields, carrying with it the smell of cut grass and the low murmur of another day's worth of debates. Inside the media tent, microphones clustered like flowers toward Asante Samuel Jr., the Browns' newly acquired defensive back and one of the most vocal players in the locker room. It was supposed to be a routine post-practice presser. But as always, Samuel had a way of lighting sparks. "Joe," Samuel said, leaning on the podium, eyes bright behind tinted shades. "Man, Joe's a security blanket. That's what he is. You know what you're getting. He's steady, calm. That veteran presence every team needs." Reporters nodded, scribbling notes. They'd heard this before. "But," Samuel continued, pausing just long enough to make every recorder in the room perk up, "I'll tell you something. Shedeur Sanders? He's getting real hard to overlook as QB1. The room went silent for a heartbeat, then exploded with questions. Later, in the locker room, Shedeur sat on the bench, scrolling through his phone as the clip of Samuel's words began to go viral. Teammates crowded around him, some laughing, some shaking their heads in disbelief. "Yo, Rook," said wideout Elijah Moore, grinning. "You hear that? Sammy's out here politicking for you." Shedeur smirked, trying to keep his cool even as his heart thumped in his chest. "Man's just talking," he said. But deep down, it meant something. A lot, actually, because this was Asante Samuel, a Super Bowl-blooded competitor, not known for handing out praise lightly. And in a quarterback room still tangled in questions, Flacco's steadiness versus Shedeur's raw upside, this endorsement felt like a crack in the old walls. The next day, the practice fields buzzed with new energy. Flacco went first in team drills, executing clean checkdowns, commanding the huddle with his familiar calm. It was football by the book, smooth and predictable, the kind that kept coach's blood pressure low. Then came Shedeur. He stepped under center, eyes scanning the defense. The snap came quick. He dropped back, pump faked, spun out of the pocket as a defensive end lunged, and fired a bullet 25 yards downfield while running full speed. The ball smacked into Amari Cooper's chest just before the safety arrived. The sideline erupted. Asante Samuel, watching from the other side, shook his head and laughed. "See what I mean?" he shouted, loud enough for half the field to hear. By week's end, Samuel's comment had become a storyline bigger than practice itself. National outlets ran with it. Browns DB Asante Samuel. Sanders is hard to overlook as QB1. Locker room leaning toward the rookie? Flacco still QB1. For now. In the film room, Stefanski tried to keep the team grounded. "Noise is noise," he said, pointing to the screen where Shedeur's rollout laser played in slow motion. "That's a hell of a throw, Sanders. But we evaluate everything." Everything. Shedeur nodded, jotting notes, but inside the fire grew. He wasn't just trying to be good enough. He was chasing something bigger, trying to prove that this locker room, this city, needed his spark. One evening, long after practice ended, Shedeur stayed on the field with Samuel. The floodlights hummed overhead, throwing their shadows across the grass. "You didn't have to say that," Shedeur said quietly, spinning the ball in his hands. Samuel grinned, snagging a ball out of the air as if he'd been waiting for that moment. "I didn't say it for you," he replied. "I said it because it's true. You're different out here. You see windows most QBs don't even know exist. You make dudes believe in the huddle. That ain't something you can coach." Shedeur stared out at the empty field. "Flacco's well, he's Joe. He's been doing this forever. And that's why they call him a security blanket," Samuel said, stepping closer, his voice dropping low. "But blankets don't win you a war. Sometimes you need a spark. You got that spark.